Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome to part 18 of the A-6 Intruder build series. Now in part 17, I went ahead and put down all the markings, got all that shit knocked out, and this is typically the point in the build where I would start in on the weathering. However, I'm not going to do that this time around. I've got all the markings sealed with this ammo one-shot transparent primer, which is basically if there was a clear version of Stynylrez, that's exactly what this is. It's great for sealing decals. It just blends right into the surface. It's nice and tough, and it's about the right sheen for what I'm looking for. So everything is theoretically ready to go for weathering. There's just there's one issue, and that is it is hot as fuck right now. It's mid-August. It was like 106, 107 today. It's 10:30 at night. It's still, 90 degrees outside and humid. And to be honest, that is really just punched a hole in my bucket of fucks, and they're flowing out. And I'm already starting to cast about, like, what am I going to do next? What am I going to start? What am I going to keep going? I've got an Edward VLR Mustang sitting over here. I've got a Tamiya Mustang sitting inside that got pretty much to, like, most of the way through construction. Got the wings all puttied, so I'm fluttering about. So instead of rushing through the weathering, rushing through all the shit and just finishing this thing, I'm trying to sort of step back, slow down, and get all the little shit that I can get done before we tackle weathering. And so what does that mean? Well, that means things like the gear struts. That means things like the nose gear door. I need to put the lens in here. I need to put the little, tri lenses excuse me, back here. I need to wrap up the AGM 123. I've got the ejector racks to play with. I've got shit that I just haven't even touched yet. The Pitot Tube in the top of the tail is a great example. The arrestor hook is another one. The steps in the crew ladder, actually like the internal one that's on the intake, I just haven't even touched that shit yet. So I want to get all of that stuff sorted and ready to go. I want to get the wheels finished out, shit like that. Just get it all finished, ready to go, then dive into the weathering, so that once the weathering is done, we're pretty much at the end of the build. I am not planning on adding a final clear coat to this. The weathering is going to be the final thing, and I'm just going to kind of let it cure out, because again, it's hot as shit, and so it can just do that. And the oils that I use, they tend to dry pretty well. I use them in a way that they go on thin. I'm not just slathering piles of oil on there. They're being worked in very thin layers, very translucent layers. So I think that should work out well. It's worked out pretty well in the past couple of builds I've done. The P47M, which there is a video series of, I did the same thing, and I got some very nice sheen variance going on between the dead flat of the oils, slight sheen of the camo itself. I did the same thing on the 1D Corsair last year, the same thing on the Razorback right around the same time I was finishing the Corsair up. So fingers crossed I'll be able to pull that off with the Intruder. If not, then it's one or two flat coats to finish it off. So with that, let's swing this thing around and let's start working on the sway braces for the multiple ejector racks. Okay, so let's talk about sway braces. Now, if you look at this triple ejector rack, you can see this one already has sway braces installed. Right here, right here, right here, right here. And right here and right here. Now, Edward does a good job of capturing the detail on these. However, they make them a pain in the absolute ass to clean up. I mean, just look at this. So you've got basically the little pad right here, right? And then under each pad you've got two posts, and you've got a third post, or a fifth post, right up the middle. These are not fun to remove. Basically, clip them out, clip these flush and then just essentially snap that one off and come in with an X-Acto knife and do some cleanup. So I did that with 24 of these damn things. Let's get them into frame. Yeah. And last night I went ahead and painted them black. Now they're not black in real life, they're more of a titanium-ish looking colored metal. So I am actually going to paint them just because I want that warm tone to come through. I'm going to paint them with some anodized aluminum. I will note that the MRP titanium isn't too far off, it's just not quite as warm. You know what, calling an audible on this, I'm actually going to use the anodized aluminum and the titanium mixed 50-50. Let that sit and dry for a little bit. So you get what's going on. I'm not going to make you sit through all 24 of these. And here we are, a bunch of titanium / anodized aluminum sway braces. Next up, it's time to use some Mod Podge matte, which is a nice sturdy PVA. And use that to glue all these sway braces to the multiple ejector racks. How about that? Now I'm first going to focus on the ones back here where the rock eyes go, because then we can put the rock eyes on, make sure everything fits up, and use those to kind of help protect all the others that we need to install. So check that out. Cool. Okay, so we've got the sways attached to the multiple ejector racks. They're looking pretty good. I'm going to let the Mod Podge set up for a little while before we revisit those and wire them up and all that good stuff. Next up, we have the tail hook. And in typical trumpeter fashion, this thing has, zoom in a little bit, this thing has mold seams all over the damn place. So to get rid of these, come on. I basically just take an X-Acto knife, scrape the ever-living shit out of it. And there's no point to even doing the backside. This is the side that's going to be visible, so fuck. I feel like the tail hook is less important on the Intruder than it is on many other naval builds, because it actually has like a little housing that it sits in. It doesn't stick out the back between engines or any of that kind of bullshit. So that's a fairly simple one. I've got this cool little attachment piece, and these stick into the tail hook bay. There's another piece that I need to paint up that goes on top of them and basically kind of like locks it into the bay that it sits in. Okay, there's that. Okay, well, things like the arrestor hook setup, I've got a bunch of stuff that needs to be painted white. And one of those is the little lenses that go in the nose gear door. Right there. And so, Trumpeter provides this as a clear part, which is pretty cool. The back's kind of bulged, that's where sort of the bulbs are housed and all that stuff. So, I'm going to paint this in basically reverse bare metal order. Starting with some MRP chrome. On top of the chrome, we're going to add a bit of MRP black. Again, reverse bare metal. Let that chill for a bit. Okay, back to the cleared out linen to knock off some of these parts that need to be white. Start with crew ladder steps. Let's move on to the gear struts here. These need another coat or so to kind of add the crud and grunge. So just when I thought we'd had enough of red, we've got a little bit more to do. So the red leftovers that we have are really, really minor. They're basically these little supports for the crew ladder. See if I can two birds with one stone it. And then we've got the backs of the Zuni rocket pods. The Zuni rockets in the pods, I should say. Whatever, there's some backing pieces that need to be painted red. And that should be it for the red. Yay! Next we're going to deal with the nose door light. And for this I'm going to be using some UV glue because I really don't trust the kit's clear part. It's got some janky sprue connections and all that shit. So, yeah. This piece is basically done. I'm probably going to do a little bit of oil work to it just to get a little bit more shit. But the cool thing about these UV glues is that they build quite nicely for this sort of thing. That looks like it's carrying to the edge. We're just going to give it a minute with the UV light here. Let it do its thing. And voila. We have a nose door light. Okay. Next up, we're going to go ahead and get these bastards glued into this little bullshit here in the back of the LAU-10. They're Photoetch. I painted them red. And now we're going to add some ammo ultra glue. Sweet. Ta-da! Okay, the next mission is to go ahead and wire up the ejector racks. So for this, we've got a bunch of lead wire. It is 0.015 inches, which is something in millimeters. 0.35, I think, something, 0.4. And I have already come in here and done myself a little test fitting to make sure that this will actually work. And that's probably way too long. But for now, we just want to get these in. Cool, that looks pretty sweet. Okay, there we go, all wired up. I believe I still need to come in here and paint these, but we've got cabling. Okay, now it's time to paint these stupid wires. We're going to do as much as we can with the fat brush, and then we'll come in and thin it up. This I'm using Vallejo Gray Green, which is a really rather more gray than green. Cool. Got that shit painted. Okay, up next, it's time to start putting down a modified version of Magic Wash, which is typically made with something like alkaline aquagloss, water, and some paint or some ink. So the modified recipe calls for using some K-Colors X10 instead of the aquagloss. It's basically a flat. It's like a, I would call it a mostly flat. It's not dead flat, but it's pretty close. And it has a lot of the same properties as aquagloss in terms of sort of leveling out and distributing shadows nicely and whatnot. And I've added some NATO black into it so we can have some fun. And this is really for the gear struts and things like that that haven't really been hit yet by anything interesting like washes and whatnot, the way that the MERS have. So you get all this lovely raised detail in these bays. A lot of this is about picking that detail out, letting it shine on its own. Alright, so I've applied the magic wash, and it's time to get rid of a few of the little... It's time to get rid of a few little areas where it went over where I necessarily wanted it. And one cool thing about the X10 versus using aqua gloss is I can come in here with Ammo's acrylic thinner and literally just remove shit. It's very similar to the process of using oils and mineral spirits, actually. One thing I'm kicking myself about, stupid ass black rails. I just don't feel like I can make them look good. I've tried. I was honestly hoping that this magic wash on the perimeter would kind of blend them a bit better, but eh. Okay, here's a good example. So, put the wash on this thing, and we had a little bit of, it looks like drainage. Now, I also don't know if I would have been able to come back and remove this tomorrow. I think this is probably a thing that's best done basically right after you put the wash down. Or right after it has a chance to set up a bit. Otherwise, I could see that hardening up. And you'd really be fucked. Because that's basically a paint it over again dipshit move right there. So the more I look at these rock eyes, the more I'm just not happy with the job I did on these black rails up top. They're just not, they're not working for me. For this I'll be using some tire rubber, MRP 173. Much better. Sweet. Okay, next up we've got a bunch of little clear parts. These are going to get the Tamiya X27 clear red treatment. And the only problem is I had to thin this shit way down to spray it, so I'm probably going to have to hit multiple coats to get that good deep red buildup. Hear this thicker mix whistling in the fucking airbrush. You know, one thing that's interesting here, put it against a darker background and it definitely darkens up quite a bit. Finally getting there. I think that'll have to do. There we go. Red. Okay, so switching gears entirely from the clear parts, I want to go ahead and weather up this stupid bulkhead that's been basically haunting me for quite a while. We need to weather it up so that we can go ahead and install it and all that good business. I'm going to use this little piece of tape back here to kind of help me hold it. And I'm going to lay down some Guns Multi-Gray weathering color. So that's looking nice and grimy. Fantastic. Now, while we're at it, something else I want to grime up here. I need tweezers for this. It's our favorite AGM 113. Go ahead and get the bomb body a little bit. As this sucker dries up, we can come in and kind of sweep away the worst of the excess and just leave that really pleasant sort of general sense of griminess going on back here. And because it's at the back of the cockpit, the back of the canopy, pretty hidden from view, leaving it a little bit more stark than I normally would seems to make sense. Back to the bomb, this time with some sandy wash. So again, making this thing all dirtied up. Okay, so here we have the finished AGM 123 Skipper 2. All the stuff has been attached. The nicely flattened bomb body compared to the seeker head and the fins and everything on the back. Pretty happy with how this has come out. Alright, the next order of business is the Pitot Tube that sits at the top of the tail. So I went and found this on Sprue O, and it took a bit of hunting to find it, because there are a shitload of sprues in this kit. And here it is. What a fucking dog. I know that I have crapped on Italeri in the past for the shoddy nature of kind of their, what I call the final bits. Antennas, pitot tubes, things like that. And this isn't as bad as those. There's no weird cancerous tumor type things stuck to it or any of that kind of stuff. Just a sprue gate. But it's just a shoddy lump of plastic. Not a big fan. So I went and grabbed some metal, and I grabbed the Dremel, and I grabbed some super glue and sanding sticks and a file, and I made my own. And, I'm sure this isn't exactly 100% accurate, but with paint and shit like that, it will do the job. So, time to go ahead and prime it up. And here is the Pitot Tube all painted up, ready to be installed. Sweet. One more thing off the list. So now let's get back to the gear doors. So on this nose door, I've gone ahead and added some grunge to the outside surface. This is a bit of, I think it's cream brown and Starship filth, basically neutral tones, grimy tones, the kind of shit you would expect to see on an Intruder. So the stuff happening here is not magical in any way, shape, or form. It's just basically a bit of randomized oil placement, coming in and working it in. I think this sort of general grime is a bit different from like Rinaldi's oil paint rendering, because it's, you know, we're not going for like rust on a hatch lid. This is more just kind of shit all over. So it's kind of a blend of like dot filtering and OPR. So once we get a little bit of brown in there, come back in with Starship filth. Again, going for that sort of random, dirty, holy shit, we've been bombing Iraq for several weeks and hunting the Iraqi Navy off the coast. And we're flying multiple sorties a day, and there's not time to give our flat, worn-ass paint job a bath. And that's currently way dirtier than we want. So again, the thing I like about the stippler, really good at sort of getting this to a blended state where it looks grimy, but it doesn't look overly so. Okay, so we're closing in on the final moments of this episode, and we're going to finish off with the canopy. And specifically, I want to deal with this map light, and I want to put a few switches in. So we've got the Mod Podge, which is a really good, nice holding PVA. Alright, so I went in and said fuck it and got out some Loctite Ultra Gel, which doesn't fog clear parts as long as it's kind of put near them, and got the lamp installed, got the switches installed, and got the corded cable installed. So with that, I'm ready to call episode 18, is it? A wrap. And I still have a few things left to do, but they're really, honestly, not video worthy at all. So they are things like the mirrors that would have been awesome if they'd been provided in silver, but instead they're brass. So I need to paint those and install them and a few other small things, and then we are moving on to weathering the big ass Intruder. So thanks for sticking around, thanks for checking this out, and I hope you're finding it useful, and we will meet again in the next installment.